Pre-Law and Business Society on the UCLA campus. We're very excited and honored to be bringing in Mr. Seth Krauss, the CLO of Endeavor, one of the largest talent agencies in the world, and also a member of the Minority Corporate Counsel Association. Thank you so much for coming, Seth.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll just go straight into the first question. Could you give us a little background information about yourself, please?
Sure. I always like starting with a broad question. Born in New York City, we're on the burbs, but grew up in New York City. My father was a Broadway producer. My mother raised me and three sisters, the youngest of four. I went to school here through high school. I went to Duke University in North Carolina and then WashU Law. Graduated in 1995, and from there I went to work at the Manhattan DA's office, having spent the last semester in law school on the Hill working in a fellowship for Carol Moseley Braun. I spent about 8.5 years in the Manhattan DA's office working for Robert Morgenthau, the first 5 of which were as a street crimes prosecutor, working in significantly the sex crimes and domestic violence unit, which was sort of the inspiration for me wanting to go to the DA's office. And then the last 3.5 years working in white collar cases, including a case that was part of the inspiration for the movie Boiler Room and the investigation of Chase and Citibank and Enron's collapse. I left the DA's office and moved over to Morgan Stanley and helped Morgan Stanley build a regulatory group. And by the time I left, I was the head of the regulatory function there. I left in 2007 to become the general counsel of a public company. At the time, the general counsel of Morgan Stanley thought it was crazy because it was a video game company. It was shortly before Grand Theft Auto 4 was released. And it was released the same weekend as Iron Man with about 3 or 4 times the gross domestic box office. I think video games were at mainstream. And so I was hired because they were one of the first companies caught up in the stock options backdating scandal. They needed a regulatory guy, a fixer, a problem solver. And over the course of 8 years or so, I helped rebuild the legal function and helped lead the company through some challenging times, getting the corporate function out of the way of the creatives and letting the creatives create. Right. And you saw some tremendous content from Rockstar and from 2K and from some of the other publishers we worked with. And by the time I left, it was one of the most successful video game companies in the world. I left Take-Two in June of 2014 to come over to Endeavor. WME, the talent agency, had just bought IMG, the sports management and events company. And they were looking for a general counsel, and they came knocking on my door. And over the course of the last 6 years or so, I've sat on the executive management team at Endeavor. We've acquired about 25 companies over that time, including the UFC, pro bull riding, Miss Universe, a wide variety of things. And we're now a sports and entertainment company with global footprint, and I manage a team that sits around the globe.
Amazing.
That's awesome. And I know that we're gonna get into later and how you manage, all those various, companies that you talked about, Endeavor, being a part of and having a big role in. But before we get into that, I want to ask a little bit about how you decided to get into law and what advice you have for students who are pursuing a career in entertainment or media and any of these fields that you work in.
Well, look, I went to law school because I wanted to work with the victims of crime. I wanted to be a prosecutor in my hometown and help particularly victims of domestic violence and sex crimes. I'm the youngest of 4. I have 3 sisters. I have some deeply personal reasons for wanting to help the victims of sex crimes without having to go into too much detail about my loved ones. And I felt like it was a calling for me. That's what I went to law school for. I didn't go for another reason. I was fortunate enough in law school to find a school that did a lot of clinical work, which was WashU. About 20% of its class goes to DC for the final semester, and works in a fellowship. I was fortunate to get to work on the Hill, and frankly, if I didn't get the job at the DA's office, I would have stayed on the Hill. I thoroughly enjoyed the policy stuff there too. Um, so my path to law school was because it was what I wanted to do. It was an avenue to help be involved in something that meant something to me. What I often say to undergrads when considering law school is, look, law school is a trade school. It's a place of rudimentary learning of ways in which to think and attack problems and solve problems and analyze the law. You learn how to be a lawyer once you practice. This is really a trade school to learn how to get prepared to be a lawyer. There's a lot of value to it in lots of fields, and you see lots of former and reformed lawyers doing lots of different things in the world other than practicing law. But it is an investment for people, whether you want to practice law or not. In terms of trying to figure out what to get into, a lot of people go to law school thinking they want to do one thing, and they start to learn the law in that area, and they frankly decide that's not what they want. Entertainment law itself doesn't really exist as a premise. There are entertainment companies, and there's law around them. There's intellectual property law, and there's tax law, and there's employment law, and there's litigation. And when you think about my legal department, we have litigators, and we have corporate lawyers, and we have employment lawyers, and we have labor lawyers, and immigration lawyers. We have lawyers who specialize in film production and distribution, and and sales and licensing. We own a for-profit high school called the IMG Academy in Florida. So I have a couple of lawyers who sit at a school where we have about 800 boarding students, about 400 day students, about 10,000 campers a year, let alone professional sports teams that come down there. We have a hotel there. The UFC is the most significant MMA promoter in the world, and so we do a lot of fight promotion through the MMA, through the UFC, excuse me. But with the Pro Bull Riding Tour, we have animal welfare laws we have to cover. So we have a wide variety of law. We, hundreds of leases. There's a big real estate practice. So an entertainment company can have lots of different areas of law. And I think when people start to think about entertainment law, that's really more about the business that they're in that you may find compelling. And, you spend more awake hours at work than anywhere else, even if today that's virtually. And so if you don't find something that's interesting to you, it can be a long day. And so it's great if you find something that's interesting to you to try to pursue it, but understand that you're going to be pursuing avenues within that, like tax or employment, or litigation or intellectual property.
Definitely. Thank you for that.
Got you. Now, I know, Seth, you've delved a little bit into your involvement in Endeavor, but can you talk a little bit more about your experience at Take-Two? You were there for a couple of years, and much of your fortune has been made at Take-Two. So how you got the position, and what was your experiences there?
I always enjoy being told where my fortune was made. I wish that were true. I was working at Morgan Stanley. I was very happy there. I was a direct report to a direct report, and then to the general counsel, and in a department of 1,200 people. That's pretty senior. I enjoyed what I was doing. I was challenged every day, and I wasn't really looking for a job, but much like other times in my career, I had the fortune of opportunity, which was Take-Two was looking for a general counsel. They had the stock options backdating scandal, and a general counsel who ultimately was convicted of a crime in connection with his employment at Take-Two. And they needed someone who, they were more interested in someone who could help them fix their governance issues and their problems. And they weren't worried as much about whether I understood the law of the business of video games. They figured they could teach me the business. So they took a little bit of a flyer on me, and I took one on them because they weren't current in their filings. They didn't have much cash on their balance sheet. I believed deeply in their IP and in their creativity, but as a business, they were at risk. And so I took risk, which not a lot of lawyers like to do all the time, because as a profession, we're sort of on the more conservative side of the risk spectrum.
Right.
So I figured it was my opportunity for next step up. And I knew, given my skill set as a sort of problem solver and a regulatory guy, that was probably the way I was going to progress, was to take some risk and go to a troubled company. And I was fortunate that I got there at a time of a lot of change within management, and a management team led by Strauss Zelnick and Krauss that really saw how to run a company and taught me an awful lot about management and giving the business the chance to do the business. And I spent 8 years there, I think 8 years there, thereabouts. Really fortunate to sort of help people do their own creative thing and add value where I could and know what I could do and what I couldn't do.
Understood. Thank you.
So for the next question, I know that we talked a little bit about, you said how you Endeavor encompasses IMG Academy and as WME and other companies, but from the legal standpoint, what is it like to manage such a diverse portfolio of companies and also, delve into legal issues within these industries and managing all of that as the officer?
Well, it's a challenging job. I enjoy the challenge. I'm very fortunate to have a team of truly excellent lawyers to work with in my team. We have lawyers all over the world. We supported businesses that look to partner with us, and so we're very fortunate in that way. But you have to take the time to learn and to listen before you act. And so I think with so many different businesses, it really does take a lot of focus to understand what the business is trying to accomplish and what laws, rules, and regulations overlay with their business needs and find the sweet spot between business acumen and process without needless red tape. So sort of knowing when to say no and how to facilitate getting to yes whenever you can. But it's complicated. The sun doesn't set on the company. And so the challenges never cease. I would be hard pressed to find days in the last 6 years that I've truly been off because of that. But I have, as I said, a tremendous team of lawyers in all different areas of law that have worked with me tirelessly to help this company succeed in every which way we have succeeded. We've had an opportunity to be part of that success.
Understood. Thank you, Seth. So kind of going a little deeper into that kind of concept of, could you tell us a little bit, especially pre-COVID, how was your day-to-day and long-term responsibilities, as CLO of Endeavor? And I know that you are stationed in the New York office, but how often would you travel between, the Beverly Hills office, and you have many other offices across the nation? What's the kind of day-to-day roles for you, Seth?
Well, I think, look, you sort of have a couple of different verticals that you travel through when you're at a role like mine. One is you're a counselor to the senior executives at a company. Another is you're a manager of a function. Another is you're the chief lawyer for the function, so the material items come to you. Another is you're a member of management to others within the company and speak on behalf of the company. And particularly as a lawyer, I think I'm one of the sort of chief cultural and ethical officers of the company, along with the CFO and the chief of human resources, head of communications. I think, we have a cabinet of people who help the management team walk the walk of how we want to run our company, how we want to treat our employees, how we want to be. And so all of those things happen. When I first started, most of the C-suite was in California, and part of my deal was I was expected to be out in LA about a week a month. Over time, as we've grown, we really have three significant offices. We have one in LA, one in New York, and one in London in terms of the seats of the executives, but we have offices all over the world in terms of the business. We also have, for unique businesses or individual operating units within our umbrella, like the UFC, they're located in Las Vegas as a headquarters. They have employees other places, but that's their headquarters. The IMG Academy is in Florida. Sport 24, which is a television station we own, is in London. So we have lots of businesses all over the place, and part of my job is to travel to see my team as a manager, to see senior executives, to see executives writ large and employees writ large as a leader of the company. And so I'm on the road a lot. Pre-COVID, I was on the road more than half my life.
Wow.
To see people, to manage, to deal with issues as they came up, usually internally, sometimes externally, as well as then for things like government relations, lobbying, that reports into me. So I've been to Albany and Sacramento and Carson City and Washington D.C. For issues that matter to us, and so there's a lot of demand in the job. I've traveled an awful lot for this job, Been very fortunate to have really great people to work with all over the world, but you spend a lot of time on an airplane.
Got it.
And then, so kind of jumping to another topping point that we wanted to talk to you about is here at UCLA PL Trans Society, we place a huge emphasis on diversion and exclusiveness, and we always try to represent that with a lot of the events that we hold and who we bring in. And we know that you are a board member for the Minority Corporate Counsel Association. So would you mind telling us a little bit about your work with them and what your responsibilities as a board member are?
Well, I've been on the board for a couple of months now. I intentionally have been talking to them for a while, but being a director of a company, which is what this is a fiduciary duty, and you have to make sure you have time to devote to it. And given some of the demands of my company, we had a pre-IPO process last year. It took me a little while to make sure that I could dedicate the time to the entity itself. And so I waited until after the last board meeting before I joined officially. Its CEO, Jean Lee, is an old friend. I've known her for many years. She, as a younger lawyer, came to me for some networking and advice as she had worked for someone I knew. And I've known her since, and I've always admired her and the work of the MCCA. And so I got involved with the MCCA because diversity, inclusion, and equity are incredibly important topics to me personally. And I think they're incredibly important topics to me as a leader. And quite frankly, now today, it's evident to us as a society. And so, the day I started at this job, I instituted a diversity recruiting, hiring, and retention program for my department because it was clear to me that we needed one. I'm always amazed at why I have to justify the importance of the topic to me about why it's important. And I'm not suggesting that you're trying to ask me to do that, but just more generally, it's important to me because it should be important to me because in the world of right and wrong, if it's right. It's also, I was just very fortunate we had a corporate event and one of the speakers was talking about it. It's also, look, it's actually, it's good business, right? If I'm a leader and I want to hire someone, do I want the pool to be the most qualified candidates or some of the most qualified candidates? You want it to be all of the most qualified candidates. So it just makes sense logically. But for me personally, it's deeply personal and important. And I'm very proud to spend time and effort to try to advance it as a premise for me as a leader and as a person, knowing that I certainly don't have all the answers, and I tried to spend more time learning and listening than speaking on the topic. But I also know for a fact that it also takes people who look like me to advocate for change to happen. And while I'm very fortunate to live in New York, because in most places in this world, I would not be part of the majority. I would be a Jew in the corner who wasn't welcome into the club, as my father wasn't, who was discriminated against. He was good enough to run the production, but not be invited to the opening night party. So, I know I have fortune in my life, and I try to pay that back when I can. So joining the MCCA is the latest iteration of that. It's included other service within my life, and I'm just very passionate about it because I should be as a human being first and foremost.
Yeah, it definitely, and I completely agree with you. It shouldn't be something that we have to justify and something that should be a rare case. But we really do respect you and thank you for always making that a big emphasis in everything that you take on. So very honorable of you, as Patrick's in the chat.
Yes, I agree. And then Seth, this kind of really parlays greatly into our next question. So Endeavor CEO Ari Emanuel recently spoke about the recently launched initiative by Endeavor, known as the Endeavor Impact Fellowship. And I quote, "Endeavor Impact Fellowship will serve as a point of entry for a generation who recognizes the power of entertainment in educating and inspiring positive change in our communities. Could you tell us a little bit about this fellowship and how it contributes to Endeavor's commitment to diversity and inclusion?"
Well, look, I think, as with everything else, change takes work, focus, energy, investment. And this is one of the ways in which the company is trying to invest in both recruiting the best and the brightest, but also helping people who need help to get there. and breaking down some of the barriers in order to do that. We are, as a company, all companies are only as good as its people. And by the way, that's its most important resource. And so we realize that we want the best and the brightest, and we realize we want to be part of the solution. And so I think that's the ethos behind the program. It's the ethos behind the dedication of executives. It's not nearly enough, but it is one building block in an effort to make the company better and to give opportunity.
Got it.
And just kind of piggybacking off of that, I know that in light of the recent events that have been occurring and the movements that have been taking place in the protesting, we wanted to see, we're all still always learning and always trying to, know as much as we can so that we can make a change systematically and on every level that we really take on. And what can you tell us, and what would you advise to students about how we can start making a change now, and so that we can continue that through our careers? I mean, as most of us, all of the people that will be listening, want to pursue a career in the legal field.
Well, look, it's an awfully complicated question with a lot of parts, subparts, and frankly, deserving of a lot more time than we probably have. I also don't think I have the hubris to answer some of it. What I can tell you is anyone who doesn't think that that today is a time to listen and learn and absorb is fooling themselves or unable to be uncomfortable in a way that is counterproductive to growth. There is a need for real and sustained change, and a legal education can be part of that in a meaningful way, because it gives you tools to affect opportunity for yourself and for others as your life goes forward. But action and investment doesn't have to come from law school. It comes from individual action. It comes from dedication. It comes from a willingness to listen, to understand that people bring wide variety of perspectives. Every single critical study will tell you that critical decision making is better when the table is diverse, when not everyone grew up in the room. If you just think about it, if you want to solve a problem, do you want 6 people around the table who all grew up in the same room, raised by the same people? But they're going to see the issue the exact same way. Put yourself in the position of surrounding yourself with as much as you can in the diversity of opinion, idea, intellect, thought. Be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And you will grow from that. Your goal when you're at that point in your life is to grow. You're not supposed, I say to young lawyers all the time that, you judge a young lawyer's performance differently than an experienced lawyer's performance, because quite frankly, if a lawyer who's been a lawyer 20 years is executing at the same level as a lawyer who's a lawyer for 1 year, it isn't because the lawyer for 1 year is somehow an amazing lawyer. So because the lawyer for 20 years isn't as good as that person should be for having practiced the law. It takes some time. Excellence takes time. Often you hear it takes time. How do you make a diamond? Time and pressure, right? In a career, you can place a lot of pressure on it. You can put a lot of effort into it. It's still going to take time. So I do encourage you to be patient in building your career, because career is by definition a long game. It is not a short haul. But the way you do that, for me, I do it today. You listen more than you talk. You try to learn. You hear people's perspectives. I don't have an ownership on the right answer. I don't have an ownership on the only way to look at things or only way to solve a problem. And quite frankly, part of my success will always be letting other people solve problems and helping them along the way to help them do it better. But often the best way through life is to help others succeed, not just yourself. And that tide will help raise you with them.
Thank you for that.
Got it. And that was a very profound answer. Thank you, Seth. And you've talked about this experience you've had. You've been in the kind of business of being a lawyer and even, part of a company for a couple of decades now. My question was,
thank you for making me feel old.
Oh, it's just part of that career experience, long-term career experience.
It's okay. I tease because I can. I got a lot of gray hair. It's all good. It's all good.
No, you look good.
Sorry,
You look good.
sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
You're good. You're good. No problem. So, you go to law school for 3 years, and then suddenly people think, oh, you're going to law school, you have all the answers. But obviously, exactly. Right. You're laughing. And like, you go through experience. What are some things that that you feel that law school doesn't teach you and that you can only learn through experience and being actually in on the workforce?
Well, look, that's a complicated question in part because I think, and again, every law school is a little different. I think at WashU, there was probably an average of a couple of years off between college and law school. And I was one of the dumb folks who went straight through. And so, I was at a disadvantage because I hadn't gone to work every day from, clock in, clock out in a junior job and do a grind. And I was a liberal arts guy, I was poli-sci history, right? And so,
Yes.
You can float in and out a little bit when you're a poli-sci history guy. I wasn't a science guy. I think going to law school was a little bit of a rude awakening at first for me in terms of really having to grind every day to get through it. I also didn't enjoy law school at first. It was very academic, and I didn't think it was what I wanted it to be in terms of practical, how to understand the law. And I was impatient with it and was struggling. I didn't do well academically. I tell a lot of people when I talk to lawyers, I didn't have a great GPA. And I had to work hard to make it better. My first year I struggled. I think over time I was able to get some practical work through, a clinical work. I worked for a judge. I worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office in the environmental crime section. I worked for the circuit attorney in St. Louis. I worked in the U.S. Senator's office for Carol Mosebron. I was very fortunate to get practical work to actually see the application of the law. And that saved me because I became a geek about the law once I became a lawyer. When I really understood it, the practical nature of it, and loved it and wanted to be a lawyer and enjoy to this day still being a lawyer. I think the law school itself is not meant for that. It's really meant to help retrain your brain into how you analyze things, how you break things down into, conclusion, an issue, rationale, application, conclusion, SIRAC, how you digest complex statutes, how you understand the real bases of the foundations, which is how you build anything, right? Of course. I was just young, somewhat immature, impatient when it came to it, and it took me some time. I always encourage folks, if they can, take time off before they go to law school so that they're ready for a career endeavor that's a trade school for a while. Because it's valuable. I didn't enjoy it. It's also, I think a lot of schools are ultra competitive where you're graded against everyone else, which causes people to want you to fail. They don't just want to succeed.
Right.
And that's a tough environment. And frankly, it's one of the things I manage against as a lawyer, as a leader. I run a meritocracy. You succeed based upon the things you do well and how you work well with others and help others. You will never succeed for pointing out someone else's failure, let alone kicking the box out from under their feet. And, I think that law school sometimes is like that. And so I tried to surround myself with good people who weren't like that. And those are my friends to this day.
Got it. Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, and kind of jumping on something that you touched upon in that answer where you said, it's important to be learning and also throughout law school to kind of, you put a lot of pressure on yourself. And I know that all of us are, scared for the pressures that we will be facing in law school. And so based upon your experience, would you have any advice for how we can, manage the workload as well as make sure we're still succeeding so that we can continue succeeding, learning, and excelling even in the few years after we graduate law school?
I didn't really talk to anyone about law school before I went, and I wish I had. And what I would say to you is that law school is a job. If you go to class 4 hours a day and you study 4 hours a day, that's an 8-hour-a-day job. And today, that's a pretty easy job compared to what you often find. If you do that, you actually have plenty of time to take care of yourself, to exercise, and to see friends and the like. The challenge is resigning yourself to the fact that you've graduated and you now have a job. The job is law school. You should go to class and you should do your homework every day. It's like high school again. You have assignments every day. For those who are in proper classes like math and science classes in college, you will have an easier time. for those who are the liberal arts, people like me,
And
it
me,
was a rude
and
awakening.
Michelle.
And so it was, I would say it was definitely, that was a rude awakening. But it's just about being ready and mature enough to accept the dedication it takes to do it well. And once you do that, and again, you get a chance, it takes a certain amount of time, you get a chance to apply the amount of pressure you want to apply, the amount of work you want to do. If you do your work, you do it regularly, you stay on top of it, it's a climbable mountain. You often hear, like, control the things you can control your effort, bring the proper preparedness and attitude and inquisitiveness and the like. That's really important. But whether or not you ultimately grade on top of the curve or the bottom of the curve or somewhere in between, if you've done everything you can do, if you've given your best effort, the rest of it will be what the rest of it is. And I think that's just the place not to put too much pressure on yourself, because you will find avenues. As I said, I was a middle of the class guy. I still hire middle of the class people because I was a middle of the class person. And I believe in giving people opportunity. And you will find opportunity out there. It's not the end. It is, I said, for people, it is not the end of the world when you don't make law review or you're not in the top 10%, because, by the way, 90% of the class isn't in the top 10%. It seems like there are plenty of lawyers out there.
Definitely. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Seth. Okay, so Seth, now my next question is kind of focused on Endeavor itself. It can be a little confusing because the agencies merged in 2009, William Morris Agency and the Endeavor Agency. Can you kind of explain this? And I'm sure it's very complex, but the merging process, what goes into it, and also the different subsidiaries of Endeavor.
Well, so Endeavor, which was founded in the mid-90s by a couple of agents, including Ari Emanuel, eventually bought the William Morris Agency, which was the oldest talent agency in the world. And that happened in 2009, well before I was there. That is a corporate event. It's a merger. And with that, there was a structure that came in place of governance, and Ari and Patrick and some others were people who ran the company. But there was an agency. And so there were a whole bunch of partners, and the agency is a business of representing others. It's really an employment agency, right? It's helping getting talent work. I think Ari and Patrick realized the future of entertainment included a lot of things around content and around access to new platforms. Realized that the way to create the most value for their clients was to grow the business in ways that gave them access to a whole platform of opportunity. And so with that, in 2014, now WME bought IMG, International Management Group, which was a company that was founded, I think, in the 50s by Mark McCormick as a representation company with a handshake deal with Arnold Palmer, but grew into a huge conglomerate itself of media and sports and entertainment and representation. And together, what was then called WME IMG in June of 2014 became a multinational company. Over the course of the next 6 years, a number of other entities were acquired. As I said, the UFC, the Pro Bowl Riding Tour, the Miss Universe organization, Winter Wonderland, which is a seasonal amusement park in London, just to name a few. A bunch of different agencies on top of that. And so, we have a lot of subsidiaries. We're in a lot of different verticals, but the way you look at it is we're in live events, and those live events can be mass participation events. We've over time had triathlons and the Color Run. We've had food festivals and cultural events. We've had the Winter Wonderland, which is an amusement park in Hyde Park. We had and have the Miami Open Tennis Tournament. So lots of different live events in sports and entertainment, and those are just a few. Fashion Week, the like. We also run a representation business, which includes the WME Talent Agency, which is a licensed talent agency that's located in New York, LA, Nashville, and London. We have the IMG Model Management Company, which is a management company that primarily works out of New York, but has often modeling managers all over the world. And I should say primarily, but the home office is in New York. We have others like the Wall Group and Art and Commerce, representing hair and makeup and fashion photographers, hair and makeup and photographers. So we have client representation work like those and others. and they're in the space of everything from personal appearance, music speakers, to endorsements, commercials, to the traditional movie and television type businesses, to everything in between, influencers and the like. We own a media business called IMG Media that does three primary things. It represents a lot of major sport leagues in the marketing, selling, and distribution of their sport media rights. So if you're watching the English Premier League outside of the UK, you're watching Serie A outside of Italy, those types of things. That we're a company that helps sell those rights all around the globe for people to be able to consume sporting events. It also has a B2B gaming business called IMG Arena that takes streaming and telemetry rights from data rights from sports and sells them to brick and mortar casinos. So helping sports monetize gambling rights. And then it has a television channel called Sport 24 and a production business. And Sport 24 broadcasts to planes and ships, live TV, sporting programming. And then the production business does sort of, I don't know, AV production, does production for events. So the cameramen in India for the cricket league were our cameramen, that kind of thing. We represent, we had for a long time that business. The European tour, we have been in business with for a very long time, the same way, Golf Tour in Europe, Asian Tour Media in Asia. So we do a whole host of things around broadcast in the media business. As I said, we also have the IMG Academy. We have a licensing business called IMG Licensing that represents brands and consumer, and they're taking their brand to license for consumer goods. We're a multifaceted business, and I'm sure there are a whole host of things I haven't just listed that I could go ahead and list. Endeavor Content, which is the modern studio alternative, in the last couple of years has become a sort of a place for financiers and a clearinghouse for independents, and a way to help bring talent into the studio system without studios.
Got it.
So we're in every place we think we should be within sports and entertainment to help maximize the opportunity for our clients and for our company.
Got it. And then Seth kind of goes into the next question. Not recently, but Endeavor purchased the UFC while you were here in 2016 for a record $4.6 billion from the Fertitta brothers in 2016. As a huge fan of the UFC myself, can you briefly tell us about the process that went into it? I know like Silver Lake Partners was involved. Did you coordinate with Dana or Hunter Campbell or any of the others?
Well, Hunter wasn't there at the time. Hunter came on. We hired Hunter. I hired Hunter 6 months after to be the general counsel of UFC. He's now the chief business officer, and Rashay McKnight, who was my global head of litigation, is now the general counsel of UFC and co-runs global litigation with another one of my lawyers. Listen, like anything else, it was they were looking, the Fertittas were looking to sell their business. They had built an incredibly successful and valuable business, and we were one of a number of groups that were interested in acquiring, and we were willing to make it happen and able to make it happen. I think a lot beyond that I can't really go into, but
Got it.
Dana is a tremendous executive.
I love that guy.
Obviously very, very effective promoter of the business, an advocate for his employees, and has built a very successful business there. And we're very fortunate to be in business with him and for him to be part of the business.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you so much. So kind of going a little bit broader from the previous question, I think it's really important, and we've heard a lot of speakers come on and say that in order to be an effective lawyer and in business, it's really important to be an effective communicator, good at cooperation, and a leader. And so how do you take on that role, and what advice do you have for us going into the field of how to be an effective leader?
Well, look, first and foremost, and as I say this to my lawyers regularly, it may sound rote to you because I've spoken on this a lot. We're lawyers first, and you got to be a good lawyer. I think the people who don't go in knowing and understanding that that's the ticket, right? That's why you're in the room. So you got to be good at that. And I really encourage people to try to get as much training as possible before they try to go off and be some amazing, strategic executive, because it all comes down at root to, are you a good lawyer in whatever discipline, right? I started as a litigator, and so that's sort of my core is, I'll say problem assessment and solving. But you got to start with, are you a good lawyer? Are you a dedicated lawyer? Are you a focused lawyer? And then as a lawyer, it's like, how are you an effective in-house lawyer? I think that once you get to that premise, that's about understanding that you have to think like an owner, but understand it's not about you, it's about the client, and understand you have that balance of conflict of being an owner, a partner in the process, but also being that control function. That's number one. Number two is you have to be really good at process without needless red tape. And lawyers are usually really good at sort of saying, Saeed, you mess this up, you do this and this and this, you're really inefficient. You should do it this way. Of course, then they go back to their desk and it looks like, a tornado hit. And so, I think lawyers have to understand that and be self-reflective enough to understand that that's not only the giving of advice, it's how you do your own job, and you have to be really good at process, but make it no red tape. Number three is you have to really make sure that when it's time to say no, you say no. There are a lot of lawyers who don't like that. It's a conflicted position. They don't want to be, the enforcer of rules, but that's part of our job. And that's okay. But saying no is actually really easy. It's the easiest thing in the world. The best way to eliminate risk is go out of business. So you also, number four, have to figure out how to get to yes when you can. Sometimes you can't, but when you can, and every time you can, even if it's circuitous route, you have to figure out how to get to yes. And if you can do that, you can be an effective lawyer. All the other things around, articulation, communication. Look, every job, the more effective a communicator you are, the more empathetic you are, the more you listen, the more you've thought about that you don't know everything, and you try to get a lot of perspective and understand that, life's about getting tools for the toolbox. The more of them you get, the more problems you can solve, because fine, a screwdriver can do some things, and maybe a screwdriver can work at both. If it's a flathead, it can work both Phillips and flathead. But sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a wrench, sometimes you need a laser level, right? And like all those things come from the benefit of experience and time. And so understanding and bringing people into the fold and helping to educate yourself is critically important.
Thank you.
Got it. Thank you, Seth. Okay, now, Seth, my next question is COVID related. So with the recent global setbacks on business from COVID-19, how has it affected Endeavor, and what do you think, what measures will be taken post-quarantine to cope with these trying times for everyone?
Well, it's affected us like it's affected everyone. First and foremost, as I said earlier, you're nothing without your people, you're without your employees. And, we're also, New York is a big part of who we are, and New York has obviously been hit very hard. We haven't been in the office in New York or LA or London since about March 10th. So, we're all learning to work virtually. Some of that is there's growth. I used to really look down upon the idea of working from home. Part of that is legitimate, because I do believe that collaboration as a lawyer is important. So drive-by lawyering, where you can ask questions, people asking questions, as well as being present for your clients who may not want to bring you a problem directly. They may want to sort of walk by your office and say, hey, by the way, you don't get that remotely. But I think we've all learned to get a lot more of that remotely, because we also have embraced this type of video technology in a way that I don't think we did before. Some businesses have already started coming back. We've seen with UFC and PBR that the fans aren't in the stands yet. But you're hearing, right? And so, but you have UFC's already happened in the States. It's happened in Jacksonville. It's happened in Las Vegas. So you'll see smaller gatherings and B2B events rather than B2C events first, by definition, because it's more controlled. You're already seeing in California the talk about return to production and what that's going to look like. And that's critically important to get the town working, because it is an entertainment town. We'll see a lot more accommodation for social distancing, for ways in which to create space. A lot of companies that have gone to open floor plans will have some struggle there, whether they put up, temporary barriers like plexiglass barriers or the like. They'll have more challenge versus companies that maintain traditional office space where you can close your door so you can at least be in the office and not, when you're in your office, have the same problem. But, you know, in terms of the businesses of ours that are office businesses versus those that are consumer businesses, the consumer businesses are, you know, are at the exposure of what local laws and rules are. And some places are not as hit as hard and are more open already, and some places aren't. And as things come on, we'll see a business come back for all businesses in that way. I think people will be cautious, but I think humanity has always been resilient and will remain resilient. And so, you know, I think there will be a lot to consider, and, you know, people have to be patient and considerate and empathetic. You don't know anyone's own personal circumstances of pre-existing health conditions or familial issues, or fear and anxiety. And I think we'll, you know, like all businesses, try to navigate as best we can using our moral compass as part of that.
Got it. Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, I mean, definitely with the recent thing of COVID, I mean, adapting to new circumstances has been something that we've had to do very rapidly. And I feel like it's been it might feel kind of crazy, but even in recent years, industries are changing so rapidly. And I know that especially sports and entertainment are fields that change, I could say, all the time. New things are coming out every day. And how is Endeavor, like, how do you guys adapt to that, and what changes can we see in the future, or where do you see it going?
Well, look, you've already seen it in terms of, as I said, with UFC and PBR doing things without fans in the stands, right?
Yeah.
And you've already seen it with Bundesliga. I know this is the US, so soccer is not number one sport to talk about here, but
I am a soccer family. I know all about it.
But you go outside the U.S., which I know is hard for Americans because, you know, the world does revolve around us. But once you actually realize there's a bigger world there, I mean, let's face it, soccer's coming back as well. I think people are yearning for normalcy first and foremost, and so wherever they can get it, they're going to appreciate that in the first instance. It is important that we are, as the UFC was very voice forward on this, considerate of safety protocols. Over time, we'll learn more by definition, and we'll learn how to be better about this. But you try to be as considerate as you can. But, you know, look, the UFC, the fighters aren't our employees. They're, you know, we're the fight promoter. They want to fight, and we're trying to put on a fight, and the fans want to fight. And so, you know, I think the reality is businesses adapt to the circumstances around them to try to deliver content. We've seen with movies, you know, direct to consumer, where you would have seen theatrical release. We've seen other things pushed. James Bond got pushed. Trolls got released. My children have watched Trolls repeatedly. So, you know, I think we will always adapt to the opportunities ahead of us to engage with consumers, deliver content and the like, and find new ways to do so. But I also believe that people will want to get out when they can get out, and we will have to find ways to congregate safely, but also outside of our homes. I do believe people really want to get out of their homes. And so, you know, we'll have to, as all businesses, figure out what that means.
Seth, my next question and it's more of a personal question in terms of curiosity, in terms of when you're talking at the high executive leadership at Endeavor or any other major like corporation or conglomerate, could you tell us like the difference between the roles of, for example, like a CEO versus like EVP versus like an executive chairman?
Well, look, I think all companies, you know, you sort of have your day job, and then you have your leadership job. And the day job for me is I'm the head lawyer. For the CEO is that they're head of the business, right? For the CFO, they're the head of the finances. For the CHRO, they're the head of human resources. They're head of the bodies, right? The head of comms, right? The people have a role, and that role is part of an organizational chart that builds up the business and how you run a business and how you manage people. And then you also figure out how you interplay with each other. I call my CFO, my CHRO, and my chief communications officer regularly to ask them what they think of something if I'm trying to solve a problem. They do the same with me, because it's also about good judgment, right? So problem solving is a partnership, and we're all part of that executive leadership team. And so we partner with each other, and we talk about our challenges, and we talk about problem solving. We ask questions, and we listen to each other. But I think every company, you sort of start with, as I said, for lawyers, you're there as a lawyer. I'm there as the lawyer. Like I'm there to be a lawyer. Like that's why I'm there. I'm a manager. I'm a counselor. I'm a lot of things, but I'm there because of the JD diploma that I don't know where it is, but somewhere has my name on it. I promise.
So my last question before I sign out, and then Saeed will do the closing, is what is personally your favorite part of your job, and what makes it most rewarding for you?
People I work with is my favorite part of my job. I work with some just amazing people, creative people, talented people, smart people, all over the world, different experiences, backgrounds, just belief systems. It just, you grow every day by who you interact with. And I've gotten the chance to do that around the globe in ways that, I don't know that you can expect when you're a kid growing up in a city. You sort of, your surroundings are your surroundings, and it's sort of, your world exists in the parameters of wherever you travel, right? And this job has taken me all over to meet all sorts of interesting and amazing and smart and challenging people, who have been wanting to work with me. And I have a department of amazing lawyers who I'm very, very fortunate to work with, as well as corporate security and government relations and other things that I work through. But it's the people I work with is what makes my job amazing. And yeah, look, is it cool that I'm part of the process that helps ensure the UFC does what it does, or the IMG Academy does what it does, or pro bull riding? Like, I wouldn't have expected to be part of the bull riding tour, but I have lawyers who cover it, and then they problem solve with me, and I find it really interesting, and I like helping them do their business no differently than I like helping IMG models do their business, and I like helping the WME talent agency do their business. It's just the wide variety in a company like mine. It's never boring. It's always interesting, but it always goes back to the people. As I said earlier, you spend more waking hours at work than anywhere else, and having people that you look forward to seeing and working with and going to battle with and being in the foxhole with, sometimes facing off with, is what it's all about.
That was the great answer. Thank you for that.
Great, thank you, Seth. Seth, I know you have I know you're a busy man, so we won't hold you for too long. If I could get 2 more questions in.
Sure.
Before we sign off, what advice do you have for undergraduate students, UCLA, USC? UCLA is better than USC, obviously, but but any undergraduate students that hope to pursue a career in law, entertainment, business, or whatever, any advice you have? And I know you went over some.
Listen, I think it's follow your passion. I think don't be afraid to take chances, explore, learn, listen, understand that you don't have all the answers, and that everyone can give you another perspective. And enjoy your lives. It will, trust me, you're going to blink your eyes. There was a time where my hair was as dark as yours, and now it is more salt and pepper these days. So it happens in a heartbeat, and I mean that. And I can't believe I'm saying it, the old man saying it. It's embarrassing, but
you're looking good, Seth. You're looking good.
I will just be honest with you.
Michelle would agree.
Yes.
It's a blink. I turned 50 in a couple of weeks, and it's a blink of the eye from when I was 25 and just starting my legal career.
Seth, what date will it be? So we'll make sure we send a happy birthday to you.
Oh, come on now. Bastille Day, July 14th.
July 14th. We're writing that down. Michelle's writing that.
All right, fair enough.
Noted.
You can all sing him happy birthday.
Yes, we will do that. Now, you are going to be extremely biased in this question, but I'm still going to ask it. What's better, LA or New York?
I will tell you that I happen to have a great affinity for LA. When you spend as much time indoors in the winter as I do, you learn to appreciate some of the
I have
warmer
not
weather.
seen fresh snow yet.
I had friends in college who had never seen frozen ground, and so it was sort of astonishing to them when the mud froze because it got cold in North Carolina. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know how to process that because I came from New York, where we had every year snowfall that would accumulate to several feet. So I love New York. I've grown up there. I'm a New Yorker, true and blue. I live in the suburbs of New Jersey, having gotten married to a true Jerseyite. But I still, when I'm asked, I say I'm from New York and I live in New Jersey. So I'm a New Yorker, true and true. But I happen to love LA. I really do. I think it's a great place.
No, Seth, we love the pride. And, you know, when things get back to normal post-COVID, we would love, I know you're right there in the Beverly Hills office. You don't have an excuse. You're about 1 mile away. So we would love to have it in
more
person.
than happy to come by. I will tell you that if there's one thing I will ask you all to do is what I've done through my career, which is pay it forward. I've had help. Everyone has help. Not everyone pays it forward. I've been very fortunate to have help in my career, and the payback for that is I help others. I'm never unwilling to. I take cold calls from undergrads and grads and young lawyers all the time, and I try to help them because people have helped me, and that's what we do. We help forward, and so I'm more than happy to do that. Despite the fact that clearly Duke is better than UCLA, it's okay. I'll accept that. I said it.
I said it. This on recording, Seth. Oh no.
You know what, Seth? We'll take you, Michelle, especially because I'll be graduating.
I've always been a fan of the Bruins. It's okay. I've always been a fan of the
We'll
Bruins.
give you a campus tour, and then we'll ask you this question again.
Fair enough. I've been to campus. I've actually spoken at UCLA before. So.
Oh really?
I've done the Directors Institute at Anderson. So I'm actually a big fan of UCLA. And,
we'll make sure that when you come and when you finish, you'll be like, you know what, this was my favorite org at UCLA. That will be our goal.
Trust me, if I can't imagine a greater school to go to as an undergrad than UCLA. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much, Seth. Seth, I know you're
Absolutely.
super busy. Thank you again for coming through, and thank you, Michelle. Michelle will be the president next year, so I definitely want to connect you with her and keep on building. Thank you so much. I reached out to you, and you were very gracious in accepting this, and I look forward to keeping up with you. And thank you for helping us. I'll have this all recorded. We'll make a good thumbnail, and we'll post it, and I'll send it over to you.
My pleasure, all. Be safe. Be healthy.
It was our pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Seth. You have a good day.